are tired of women.
That's no good.
Come on, man.
Clap for that, you stupid bastard.
Fruit basket.
Okay, we are live with my good friend Shannon Torrence. She is a voice actor, and she's also the host of the podcast Magic is Real. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. I'm a big fan of your show, guys.
You were actually one of the original fans. Like, you and I knew each other when I was in my early 20s, and then when you were working the door at Room 5, which was a music venue that no longer exists. And we got to know each other well then, and then we didn't talk for a while, and then you watched our podcast, and then we reconnected after that. So
that's right.
Which I'm very, very grateful for that happening. Yeah. So Shannon's podcast, Magic is Real, is essentially you interview everybody from people who have had either death experiences that they came back from, to spiritual mediums, to I'm trying to think of like the vast array of different people you've interviewed. Can you kind of list some of these different occupations?
You've been doing your homework.
Yeah.
I interview. I've been doing a lot of near-death experience testimonies right now, and started with mediums just because I knew a lot of mediums, and anything from psychics, mediums. I'm actually having someone who's a manifesting coach on soon. I had an astrologer because I always wondered.
Yeah.
How do we know astrology works, and how does that all work? What are these charts? Just anything metaphysical, really. And I even interviewed a guy he is a medium, but he's more of a paranormal investigator background. And he speaks to spirits using a spirit box, which is super creepy, but really interesting and cool.
So whenever you talk to like some of these types of people, are there any ones, and obviously you wouldn't call them out by name, but it's like anyone that comes through where, because I know you're I should probably make my stance clear, is that like, yeah. I've never really had any experience that I've found to be profound, but there are some strange things, like, you and I have talked about how we're very like sensitive to the world and these kinds of things, and my sense of danger and like when it's coming, even before it comes, is really high. It's strange. It's like the world starts to vibrate, and then I notice something's about to happen. So, and it's such an unusual thing that happens that I'm open to any idea that anything is possible in terms of, what is not necessarily represented in the metaphysical, like in front of our face or whatever. But so that being said, and you're as open-minded, you probably are more than I am just by default, but is there anybody you've had on or who's in some sort of occupation that you have actually been dubious of the things that they say they can do?
I think the thing is, like, especially with mediumship, and I also am studying to be a medium, and I could go on about that because I came from the same place you do, which agnostic. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm open to it. I don't know unless I see it, unless I can. I need to understand it. I need to see it with my own eyes, or I'm not going to believe it. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even realize that. I mean, I used to watch all the medium shows, Tyler Henry, Long Island Medium, and I was like, there's no way. I get that TV's edited, but if you're telling me all those people who are sobbing are actors, then move over, Meryl Streep, because how are these people? There's no way that some of the, whether or not it's all edited, it's still happening. So I always thought, well, I want to be a medium, and I'm answering your question, by the way, in a circuitous fashion. I always thought, well, you just have to be born with this gift, like Matt Fraser or whatever. You have to just sort of have it. And so I would watch it obsessively, but didn't learn that you could everyone is a medium, like you said, because you are a sensitive person. Anyone who taps into their sensitivity and is able to tune out all the distractions is going to receive messages from whatever you want to call it, the other side, another dimension, just the particles in the air that we can't see with our naked eye, but is there. And so I learned that you actually can learn to tune into this frequency. So the problem with that is everyone I've asked to be on the show, I've asked because I've watched them work and I know that they're legit. at least from what I've seen,
Yeah.
obviously. But the thing is, with mediums especially, or with really any of this stuff, the only way to know that they're, I mean, someone could fake it, I'm sure. They wouldn't last very long because people would start to say, this didn't resonate with me. But I think in mediumship, it's also that we're human. So when I do a reading for someone, I'm not always right, because I'm still learning, and so are professional mediums. Sometimes your own thoughts float in when I'm setting my intention before I read, and I say, hey, okay, Sean, I want to read for Sean. I want all of his loved ones to come in strong for me. I want them to give me strong validation. And then I kind of go, I don't go into a trance or anything. I just set that intention that I'm focusing on the spirit world. And then, yeah, sometimes I'll be like, I see a rabbit. And he's like, I don't know. And sometimes the next day, the person will write me and say, oh my gosh, he had a rabbit like collection or whatever. Like he raised. But sometimes it's just that as I'm kind of zoning out or kind of zoning in, tuning in, I'm also, my own thoughts are kind of floating by. So the problem with mediumship in general is it's not a perfect science. And that's why it's so easy if you're a skeptic to say, oh, well, they didn't get that right. Well, if you're a psychic or a medium, then what did my mom say to me the day of, August 25th, 1982? And it's like, that's not how it works. So
For sure, and I think what's also tough is like what's tough about that particular being in that line of work or being interested in that field is there are so many charlatans that are good at cold reading, like very good at it, and I think that like a lot of people are very susceptible to being manipulated. So it's like people that are very good at just digging things out of people, like. And I mean, I've even just getting people to be really transparent about their life. It's just when because so seldom are people asked questions that are, personal or whatever. And then, so when they are asked them, they either can just close down, but a lot of people just are like, oh, I want to share. Here's all my baggage and you can hold it and decide what you want to do with it. But it's almost like kind of similar with chiropractors, how like you go to ones that will actually help. And then you go to some that are like, here's our 90-day wellness program. It's going to be, $40,000 and we'll bill your PPO for that. And it's just, and then they don't really do anything. And so it's tough because I think that a very interesting field of, I think that let's call it like alternative mental health or something along those lines, gets discredited by the amount of charlatans that sort of invade the space,
Especially when there's money involved. And that's actually one of the reasons why I don't charge yet, because I don't feel I have been getting great feedback, but I'm not 100. I don't want to take someone's money unless I know that I am going to be consistent across the board. Even the best mediums in the world have off days, and they'll say, you know what, I'm going to give you your money back because I wasn't really on target today. But it should be that it's more often than not, I feel really strong about I'm like, I feel like they got what they paid for. And computer binging on the other room, and it's not mine, so I don't know how to stop it. But it's that's the thing, is that right now that's why I give them for free, because everybody's appreciative for what they did get out of it. And every single time I do a reading, I leave there going, did I just read their body language? Like, how did I know that? And I even go into that, even though I believe in this stuff, my old skeptic monkey mind comes in and goes, wait a second, is there any way I could have just followed subtle prompts? Is this a psychological game? And if it weren't for this, enough wouldn't be, my doing it myself wouldn't be enough for me to be convinced. It's seeing other mediums work where I'm like, there's literally no way that anyone could know that. So one of my mentors said, one of the things I always ask Spirit is, show me something that my sitter was thinking that they haven't told anybody. And I sat in with one of his readings the other day because he's training me, and he said something, you were just thinking this, that, and that. And she's like, yes, I was. And she starts crying. He's like, that's the validation, because I asked them, how could I know what she was thinking?
You're right.
Now you could get lucky and go, she's probably feeling this. But yeah, even sometimes I think I second guess it every day because it's so weird. It's like, how did I know that she had some accident at work while wearing Timberland shoes? Like, how did I know that? And, it's like, I saw a Timberland boot and I'm like, I'm seeing this boot on a foot. And she goes, yes, I had an accident at work and I was wearing Timberland boots and my foot was crushed, but the Timberland boots saved my foot. And that's the only reason I didn't lose my foot. And I'm like, I mean, could it be a coincidence? After, 50 reads, you're like, all right, I think there's something else going
here.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like at the same time though, I mean, it's like, if you were to just chalk it down to intuition, I mean, you and I have lived enough life. We've met a lot of people, and most people are not self-aware or intuitive or anything like that. And so like, I mean, in terms of, and I think that was probably something, you were like a naturally intuitive person before that. And you can really weaponize this to like be very manipulative if you want to. And it's pretty fucked up. But also too, it's like, who's to say that people being granted with a certain level of intuition isn't kind of spiritual in itself, or unusual or given by, some, and then it's a power for good or bad, depending on how you want to use it. But like kind of what you're explaining is like mediumship sort of goes beyond that. So I'm curious, like, what was the first reading you got where the person that was reading you called something spot on that was too weird, too coincidental, and what was that?
That's a great question, Jordan. I had a reading with a woman who actually has a reality show in Canada named Carmel Joy Baird, and she's actually one of my teachers now. But she has she's like the Long Island medium of Canada, and she said to me, "Your mother, I don't know, it was like your grandmother is saying, talk about the man who looks like Santa Claus," and I'm like, I have no idea what that means. So hang up with her, call my mom, and I'm like, what does this mean? And my mom said, okay, my ex-boyfriend, who, I'm like, they're not going to watch this. So I'm like, I don't want to call any names out, but she's like, yeah, he's been still in love with her for a long, long time. And I think he's just sort of waiting for my dad to croak so he can move. He's a nice guy, but he's been in love with her. And she said, he literally just this week reached out. And it was just horrible because I finally had to tell him, like, we dated when I was 15. Like, we're 70 now. Like, I need you to kind of respect boundaries. And she said, and I felt so bad. But the joke was that she and her best friend, who's passed on recently, like before she passed, she said she found a picture of him and said, oh my God, he looks like Santa Claus. And so their joke was, he looks like Santa Claus now because now he's got the big white beard. And it was the same day or two that she had just received this correspondence from him and just had to make this big choice about getting, kind of like setting a boundary with him.
Sure.
And it was that day that the medium was like, your grandmother is saying something or, about the guy who looks like Santa Claus. And that was relevant at that moment. And so specific in terms of that's what they called him. I didn't know that's what they called him. And there's another medium that read me that everything was from my mom. So I'm going, oh no, I wasted my money. I don't know what any of this is. Called my mom, and everything she said was stuff I didn't know. Family secrets that weren't big secrets. They're just not appropriate to tell your children. Or, and it was so down to the letter what my mom's best friend said to her before she died on her deathbed. And I'm like, how could she know the last words that this woman said to my mother?
That's pretty crazy, that one.
And, and it was, and my mom was going through something, and she was saying, she's here to tell your mom that she's doing a good job, and that I didn't know my mom was going through anything because she doesn't talk about, she's very stoic. And it turned out that all the messages were to sort of make her feel better because she was going through this thing that only spirit knew. I didn't even know.
That's really interesting because like something I wanted to talk to you about is some experience that Sean has had with his dad.
I'm excited to hear that too.
Yeah, and his dad's like very, very open and pretty plugged in. It's more like it's kind of more in like the Latino culture, so it's like it's hard to explain. So maybe you can explain it better.
On our end, I mean, I come from a family from Nicaragua, and on our end, we have like sort of like family rumors that we have witches in the family, and particularly my aunt, who has sort of been like an arbiter of what seems to be like very negative things that have happened in our family. Like crows circling our house, people falling ill with unexplainable illnesses, like coughing up coffee grinds for whatever reason, that there have been like sort of almost magical experiences that all sort of lead back to this one person or these two women in our family. And particularly I've found that in like generally Latino culture, it's more so with women in the family who have this sort of connection that they use to manipulate reality a little bit. But my dad's side has always been very spiritual in that sense. So about a year ago, I was like getting like tormented in the middle of the night at like 3-4 in the morning. I would jolt out of bed as if there was something in my room, or I'd hear a loud bang in my head or something like that. Always like for a week straight at the same exact time every single night. It was like 3:30 in the morning. I like offhandedly, I think I texted like my dad or my mom about it, because they were like, how are you doing? Like, how are you sleeping? Are you doing okay? Because I just pretty recently moved into this new place, not this one, but the one before this. And so I told them that. And then the next day my dad calls me and he goes, hey, I've been having the exact same experience at the exact same time of night, with the exact same sentiment. It's like a jolt out of bed. You're out of breath, either like sweaty or just exhausted, for no apparent reason, but as if something or somebody was there waking me up. And so he and I have always shared sort of like shared a connection to, I guess, something spiritual that really made itself clear this last year. I guess like what he told me is, or rather, and I'd love like your input or whatever, but like my experience with spirit has always been pretty neutral. It's always been like middle of the road. They aren't here to hurt me or help me. They just appear. I've had a couple other experiences where I wake up and I see figures and I'm not scared by them, but there's not anything I can do about them. So I'm not sure actually where I was going with this, but I think it's just an interesting connection that I think my dad's side of the family has.
I had to bring it up just because I was curious with you, Shannon, if you feel like you were receiving all those messages initially, like in order, because you like needed to talk to your mother about these kinds of things. Like it was like the universe telling you that.
Yeah, and well, what he just actually, you said you didn't know where you're going with this. I actually do know where you're going with this, and I have thoughts about that. But yeah, it's interesting because all of the messages were for my mother. As I said, I had no idea she was going through anything. So it was very much all these messages were like, hey, like she was having a crisis, and it's actually the most upset I've ever seen her. She doesn't really get rattled. She's very grounded and handles things very beautifully. And it was sort of like she needed this assurance. She was having a difficult time with something that was going on. And yeah, it was every single message in that mediumship reading, because I didn't really need healing. I was just there because I'm so fascinated by the whole thing, was all something I needed to tell my mom. And also validation that, her parents are actually still with us, because they reference things that I was like, that isn't true. That never happened. And then she said, oh, it did happen. But you were a kid, or you were not born yet, but this happened before you were born. And I know what that's about. So with Sean, what you're saying, there are several things. One is, there are mediums and spiritual people out there who disagree with me about dark entities and that kind of thing. I mean, I believe that there are like lower vibration spirits. Like if you're Ted Bundy, I don't think you're going to hell, because I don't believe in hell. I think you're going to be, but you can create your own hell. You're kind of floating around in a dark, murky consciousness. And there is dark energy that remains in my belief system, that something terrible happens in a house. The dark energy remains, but it's not that it's not some like person who's like, I was murdered, solve the crime.
Yeah.
It's not that. They're not, I don't believe they're stuck, because a lot of people do. I don't think it's just this like leftover energy. But what I do think happens is that people often think, and I don't think, it didn't sound like you feel that way. You're not being like haunted, or it's not something dark. As you said, you weren't afraid when you're seeing these things. It's your loved ones in spirit trying to get your attention. So a lot of times people are like, my house is haunted. It's not that your house is haunted. It's like your grandpa being like, hey, I want you to know that I'm here and I know you can see me, especially you, because if you are organically seeing figures and it's not, there is something called sleep paralysis, but that's a different, that feels like you can't move and people are often in terror and they see dark shadows, and it's really something in the brain. But if you're being you and your father both, we're all connected in, in my belief system, we're all parts of the same tree. Like, it's a big tree and we're all fruit from that same tree. So you and your father especially are very connected, your souls are very connected, therefore you will be often sensing the same feelings. So what you're feeling and sensing is most likely, I think you're saying you have this ability to see and communicate with us more strongly than most do, because your brain is just wired that way. Your amygdala is shaped differently, and so you have the ability to sense things that other people can't, or just don't realize they can. So I think what's happening is that your loved ones are being like, dude, you're a medium. You're a medium, and we're just trying to let you know, yeah, hey, we're here. We love you. It's always good. They're not trying to, hurt anything. And I bet you that your father, they're connecting with both of you because your family, and that can mean your souls were together. Most of us, at least, again, I keep saying, yes, it's all in my belief. I'm just going to say it like it's fact, so as not to repeat myself. Soul families exist in the other realm. We're then often put back together in this life. So Jordan might have been your mom, like Jordan, but it's just different. Mm. You're still in the same soul family and cluster, but you become different people. And that's a whole other tangent. But I really do think, from what I've heard, that this runs in your family. And that's because, as I said, certain mediums who are born that way, they're like, my mother was a medium, my father was a medium, whatever. It's because your brain goes into a theta state more easily than most people's. They've done brain scans on mediums and shown that their brains look different. Even the Long Island medium, who's known for being super high strung and energetic, they found that her brain is always in a meditative state, no matter what she's doing. And that's rare. I think it was Tyler Henry. They saw something similar brainwave wise, but another medium I know had her brain scanned, and they said it's almost like you were in a car. It looks like you had a brain injury, where that part of your brain is, it's like you said, Jordan, it's highly sensitive people who are trauma survivors. We're more, and I'm not, but we're being a sensitive, we're more alert to things like we know when something's going to happen. It's just like how our cats know there's going to be an earthquake. They know it.
Yeah. Sean, you didn't mention that your dad had just gotten diagnosed with cancer when that started happening, right?
No, so that's the interesting part. He had a pretty severe bone cancer in his spine, and he's perfectly fine now. But I feel as though he was, like, they caught it so early that he was very lucky. But the stuff he had to endure was quite a bit, and I think like the suffering that he went through because of that, and sort of the quiet suffering, I think maybe even so, if I'm making a conjecture about it, is that like that instance where we were sharing the same experiences was to bring the two of us together, or rather closer together. That could be it, but I'd like to think that that's the case.
Because that's been so true, like, since. But like, what's interesting about your dad is like, the other day when we were at Carlos's birthday dinner, your uncle, I asked him about this kind of stuff, and I was like asking him like, well, when's the first time you remember seeing something really clearly? And he had one of his best friends when he said he was 6, he lived in Nicaragua, he drowned. And then they were like at the memorial service, and he went upstairs, and clear as day, the person was still in his bedroom, like right in front of him, and like said he's fine, And then Sean's dad had the shit scared out of him, so he ran out screaming. But like he said, ever since then, he does see things pretty often that are very clear. But he's like, I don't really talk about it because people just they'll think I'm crazy.
Right, but that makes even more sense, because they would be coming to comfort you. They'd be actually coming to tell you, we're here, we got you. It doesn't necessarily mean just because your spirit people are there or your spirit guides are there doesn't mean you're not going to die. It just means we're all here to suffer. That's kind of we're here to learn and grow, and suffering is part of that. And unfortunately, it involves physical suffering and loss and grief and all of those things. But they're telling you, we're here. I hate to be corny, but on a show that's not my own, but I just felt such a rush of, when I connect with spirit, it's ASMR. I found out. I was like, what is this sensation? It's whenever they come to near me, I get this like tingling that goes all the way down my body. And it's always when I say something and they're saying, yes, I validate that. So they're saying like, we are with you. You're good. No matter what happens, we're holding your hand. We're here. We got you, and you have each other. It sounds like to me. But also I will say it's very rare, which is why I'm like, you're a medium. And so is your dad, or meaning just that you have a stronger connection. Seeing spirit with your naked eye is not very common. And if for any reason you or your dad doesn't want to see them anymore, you can say, hey guys, I'm happy to communicate with you, but I do not want to see you. And they'll kind of put that on the back burner. I studied with Monica, the medium. She also had a fun reality show. Love her. And she does that. She said, like, I just tell them, please don't, it's too freaky. Like, I don't want to wake up in the dark and see someone at the foot of my bed. It's just you're not ready for it. And so you can say, hey, I'd rather receive the information a different way. Can you show it to me by leaving me a symbol, like leave me a feather? Or can you just like let it be through my clairaudience, which is when I hear things, it's not like I literally hear a voice going, Shannon. And some people do, but very rarely do you actually hear it with your actual ear or, sense it like with your actual eyes. It's more like a thought. So it just feels like I'm thinking it, but I'm like, but why am I thinking? Where did that come from? So you can ask them, hey, I'm open to communicating, but it needs to be on my terms. Please don't come to me in the dark. But if you don't mind, basically they're just there to let you know, hey, we know you can see us. We're letting you know it's all going to be okay, which it sounds like it was. We're going to, like, it's not your dad's time to go. It's going to be tough, but we're all together in this kind of thing. That's what I take from it, which I think is really cool. But do you actually how often do you actually see, images or?
It's tough to say. I think the latest instance, or the most memorable one that was recent, was that about a year ago with my dad's similar experience. I haven't really had any others in this new place that we moved into, as far as I can tell, really. But yeah, so I think before that, another more memorable one was I was living I think I was still living in Florida at the time. And I had, it was, for some reason I had taken like a midday nap, and I lived in basically like what felt like a tree house. It was an actual house, but built into a tree. It was a really wonderful place. But I remember I had a room on the third floor, I guess. There was no first floor. It was on like stilts, but the first floor had like a garage. I was on the third floor in my bedroom, and I was home from, I think, college for just a couple weeks. And for some reason, I'd taken a nap in the middle of the day. And what happened was I woke up at about 4 p.m. or so, and I saw somebody clear as day in my room who looked strikingly like my RA from college, which was so strange. He had sort of long, stringy hair, about the length I have now, and big grandpa glasses, the kind that are, I guess, sort of aviator looking. But prescription, and I could see him, I could see his stubble, but what was so strange is I knew he wasn't my RA from college. I didn't know who he was, but I definitely saw him, and I wasn't scared. I just went back to sleep. I was like, okay, all right, you're in here, but I'm still tired, so enjoy yourself while you're here.
Well, that's good you weren't scared, because that would freak me out. I think even though I want to see more of that, I'm always like, hey, just so I'm positive that I'm not making this up, it would help if you could just, like, I'm happy to see you. I mean, I don't want to see you like I said, at 3 a.m. in the dark when I'm alone. not because I think spirits are scary, but because who wants to see you know, because when you wake up, you're like, is there someone standing at my bed? That's the fear. But if you are seeing things like that and you know you're not dreaming, since it happens more often than just when you're napping, you know, then they're showing themselves to you for a reason. In fact, the reason that I actually believe in this more, even though I went through I was an atheist for like the first, I don't know, 25 years of my life or something, and maybe agnostic. I don't remember, but I remember saying, I think you die and turn to dust. So emo. I mean, you know, as I'm like smoking menthols out the window, like, you just die, that's it. And I'm listening to like Nirvana every day. And so in my combat boots. So yeah, I mean, but at the same time, when I was like 14, I laid down to go to sleep, flicked the light off, and before I even fell asleep, this giant, when I say giant, I mean, this is big enough. So this big ball of light appeared over my body, and it looked like, it was as neon blue as you can imagine, just the brightest blue I've ever seen in my life. I can't even describe it. It looked, now this was the 80s. So we didn't have computers. We didn't have, or maybe, you know, late 80s. So we didn't have computers. We didn't have cell phones. There was no glowing light coming from anywhere. We didn't have electronics. We had like a rotary phone. So it hovered over me, and it was like it had no face, but it was looking at me. And all I could think of was it looked like Tinkerbell, because it was like playful in its movements. And it was sort of like looking at me like this. And then it zipped across the room, zipped back. And then all of a sudden I screamed, because like I said, it's not a scary thing, but when you don't expect to see that in the dark, I screamed for my mom to come down the hall, and it just zipped up and disappeared. And now I still wonder, could it have been a UFO type, like a being from another universe? Yes, it could have been that. Later in life, I had a few mediums. I asked, I'm like, what was that? And they said, oh, that's your guardian angels. They're clustered together and they're letting you know. And I'm like, but I never saw them again. They said, well, you screamed. They don't want to scare you. They're not there to scare you. They want you to feel protected. And so they said, and one woman said to me, they came because they wanted you to know later in life, because you were going to go down a spiritual path, that they wanted you to reference that as a touchstone of that was real. So if you're ever doubting it, just remember that bright light that I saw with my wide open naked eyes. That's why I believe you, especially because it happened to me. I mean, I was not asleep. And when it's different from a dream, it's like more real than even your like this right now. It was so vivid.
I've often wondered if people do see things like that often, but it's so out of the realm of their construction of reality that they can just ignore it. You know what I mean? Like put blinders on. Like
I did.
Yeah, I mean, like, so it's just sort of, it's just like, well, I was imagining this or whatever, or just not even see it for that reason. And it's interesting because I think that like sometimes people will get, like one of my mom's best friends is, she's really into Reiki, and she's gotten so spiritual that it's totally inaccessible to the person who isn't like at the seminar with her. You know what I mean? The language, I mean. But so like, you know, like you talk about these orbs, it's like, you know, guardian angels, like kind of the term you use, but like, you know, fourth dimensional being, it's like everything. I mean, these are all kind of relative terms that I think are all kind of the same thing. I mean, like often I've thought like what people would see as like ghosts, and I'm curious of your opinion on this, is that it could be one of two things. Like either your soul, when it leaves your body, moves so fast that it's moving at the speed of light. So fourth dimension, you kind of see echoes, right? It's like echoes of things that are moving so fast. Or I've thought, and this isn't really in the spiritual realm, that we often see people from the future that can now travel so quickly, or like time and space and gravity aren't relative anymore. And they kind of make the mistake of being seen when they're kind of just being tourists in our dumb ant existence right now. So I don't know. I mean,
yeah, I've heard that before, and I actually think it's entirely possible. I do believe in dimensions. Like I don't believe in heaven and hell. I think there's another plane dimension, and from the people that I've spoken to a lot of people, plus read every book, watched every interview, and I'm speaking with more and more people that have died. Like there was no brain activity, there was no heart activity, but they went to a different place, and they all had almost the exact same experience, except for the little details that are different. What they all tell me is that it's it there is no time. Time is an illusion, which it sounds so hippy dippy, but it really is like they're like it's hard to explain. It's like everything happens at once. I am you, you are me. I am part of everything. There is no actual timeline. Like nothing, it's all happening at the same time. So you can be living different, and people are like, well, how could you reincarnate but then still come through a medium? And it's like, well, that's a whole other thing. What, Monica the medium describes it as, she describes it as a clementine, like an orange. And that's your higher self. And then each little wedge of the fruit can branch off. We're all part of the same energy. So you can be grandma. Or grandma can stay grandma, but she can also be like a boy in India at the same time. And she can also, but she doesn't lose who she is. She's not like grandma and then the boy in India takes on her personality. It's like they have their own personalities because they all have different brains. It gets woo woo, but it gets crazy.
No, it's really not, because I think that like, it's interesting to me because it's like this, I think that, I was militant, like atheist until I was like in my early 20s. And it's like mostly just because I felt like, being gay or whatever, like religion betrayed me, Yeah. But then once they kind of lost the grip on culture, like, like, which was fast and people didn't really recognize it when it happened, it stopped really affecting me. And I started to feel a lot of empathy for these people that I call new humans, like people that sort of need something. They need like simple explanations to live, to be a moral person, but I think that like this concept you just explained is like very similar to the tenets of basically every religion, which is like, if you hurt another person, you're hurting yourself because you're all kind of connected or whatever. And even if you're going to take, spirituality or religion out of it, it's like whenever you like, I'm sure you had this situation, I'm sure Sean too. It's like you have an interaction with somebody where you just know you behave poorly. And you have two choices. Either you double down and just live with that guilt and that shit forever, or you apologize, And so, but I do think that like energy, it's like, for every reaction, there's an opposite equal reaction. It's like every action rather. And so I think that people have all, like, again, like all these terms for these things that are relative, but have no earthly explanation as to why they happen, and I think it's what makes humans really interesting. But so for people to dismiss like the spiritual side of it, I think is it's like sad for people that can't see things as like just through this lens, And so it's not woo woo is my very verbose point.
It's actually, there's the argument of science versus spirituality, and I don't think that the two are separate at all. I think they're the same thing.
Yeah.
I think that what we say is paranormal is actually normal. We just don't see it. Just like, do we see atoms and particles? It doesn't mean they're not there.
Right.
And it's just there's an argument over which religion. I'm also not religious because I don't think that one religion is correct. I think that there are our own interpretations of the same thing, that they're just interpreted in different ways because we can't possibly imagine what it is. And there's actually a lot of science behind a lot of this that shows different dimensions. I mean, Einstein too had was already looking into this, and it like the different dimensions and why are we so, why is it that we can accept things like reproduction and the shape of a flower and the fact that our brains are smart enough to create computers and there's the cloud and all these things, but we're like so skeptical about, but we, like, two people can mate and create a person out of like bodily fluids. Like, why are we're so used to that? Like, oh, that's old hat to us.
And it's weird.
So
it's
why
like
is this so crazy?
I know, and it's so weird that culture has gone in this direction where like we are now really diminishing how much of a miracle that is. That like, the like, one sperm to like what, like 40 million sperm to one egg, and the likelihood of that actually becoming a baby is like astronomical numbers. And these cells growing to form a being that is able to, like, intelligence is relative, but the fact that we're the only species that's able to talk like this about these kinds of things, and we have the luxury of having the brain power to like consider something beyond this. But I think that culture has moved in this direction of just sort of diminishing kind of the miracle that is children for whatever reason. And I think that what's interesting is that spirituality has sort of like kind of mutated versions of it have like I don't know, kind of taken over people in a way. And so it's like there's like kind of, I think, kind of bad ambassadors for this kind of thing, and like that, because if I was skeptical and you explained it to me that way, and I was a skeptic, I would have been like, yeah, that's fair. Like even if I didn't agree with the things you were saying, I would be like, well, that makes a lot of sense as to like why people would believe in this kind of thing, because the fact that we are able to have children, or the fact that like this table is solid but it's moving, you know what I mean? We know this is, you know, it's like you're saying, molecules, particles, you know, we haven't even gotten to like the quark level yet, but who knows what the fuck that'll be. And so we the things that we're willing to accept and the things we're not, this sort of like fetishization of science is a really interesting cultural thing to me, and it's I don't know what my point was. Sorry.
Well, there's something that I really love about your podcast, that I've listened to quite a few episodes at this point now, and I think what's so cool is that it really like shows the full spectrum of what it means to be spiritual and what it means to be a medium or connected to spirits. Like for example, like you interviewed the Southern Belle medium, who in her recounting all the times that she's had near-death experiences, she talks even about Jesus himself, seeing him, and how her Christian upbringing and her religion influences how she sees things and how she experienced those near-death experiences. And then your most recent episode with Peter Panagore, yeah. Your most recent episode, he talks about God, the word God being, I think he said, shorthand for this idea of being spiritual, the spirituality that binds us all together. And so like I think when people don't give it enough thought, they think spirituality just means Christianity and whatever else in traditional religion. But I think the spectrum of spirituality goes from traditional to abstract, and it's so cool that you interview such a wide variety of people who have near-death experiences, who are mediums, who I just find it so fascinating and so cool that you do that.
Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for listening to it and supporting it. And that's actually why I chose the Southern Belle medium for that interview, because I didn't want to just interview people that were exactly in the same, like even me. I believe in Jesus as like a soul, and as, you know, who he was on this earth. And I think he may have even been like an ascended sort of spirit. I don't believe, you know, I don't follow, I'm skeptical about the accuracy of the Bible, because it was translated by man. I think there's some stuff in there, but I also know that people who have near-death experiences, some of them see Jesus, some of them don't. And from what I have gathered and understand, it's because spirit will show you what you feel comfortable with, or what, you know, it's like that. They know that to you, Jesus is going to feel the most familiar, and it's going to comfort you the most. Some people see him sometimes, and I'm also open to the fact that maybe he is that he is a higher sort of spirit. I don't believe that he was Immaculate Conception. You know, there are things about it, but I'm open to it because I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm very open to it, but I think that's why I like to interview different people with different ideas, and who have had these different experiences, because all they can say is what they can't say. None of us are going to know until we get there.
Yeah.
These are people that have gone there and come back, so we don't even know what's beyond that. So they're just saying, this is how I perceived it.
And like you said, there's like a consistency to pretty much every explanation you've heard from everybody you've interviewed that have died and come back.
Yeah. Now, there are also, you will find, if you look on YouTube, there will be people that say, oh, I went to hell and it was a fiery furnace. I think, I don't know, I think something else is going on there, or maybe they were in a dark vibration and that's what they saw, or they had a seizure and it wasn't really a near-death experience. And, you know, there's so many different things, but I think it's possible it was a near-death experience, but it was shown to them for some reason, like you need, you know, to evaluate something. But the common thread in all of this is a few things that I can think of right off the bat. Is everyone that I've interviewed and that I know of, saw it wasn't always a tunnel. It was like an envelopment of darkness with a big light at the end. There were loved ones in spirit that they knew were there. They didn't look necessarily like anyone, but they just knew that's my grandpa. They could feel them. They knew who they were. And that when they went home, they realized they call it home. They're like, this isn't our home. That's our home. We're actually going home. And they say that the feeling when they get there is like, oh my God, I'm back. This is who I really am. And the other thing is they all are shown, if they get far enough, a life review where they're not judged, but they get to feel what the other person in a situation felt. They get to see what they could have done differently. They get to see how their own actions affected others. And, or if they don't get to that point, there are beings there of light that say, hey, it's not your time. You can stay, or you can go back. Here's what's going to happen if you stay here. Here's what's going to happen if you go back. It's not exactly your time, or it could be. So there's always this sort of discussion that they have with some greater being that's like, hey, it's not your time. And I hear, and why, and it seems like if there are hundreds of people who get there and there's someone there going, it's not your time, go back. You can't, I mean, assuming they're all telling the truth, which I find my people to be very credible, because I don't just interview anybody who says they had a near-death experience. Like, how could thousands of people, it's actually, I don't even know the numbers, but it's thousands and thousands of people. How could they all have the exact same hallucination when they pass? It just doesn't, doesn't check.
That's the commonality. I mean, in that, like, I kind of, like looking for like patterns in terms of like experiences, and like, even people who have UFO experiences, and like, the black triangle with the red lights is like a really common one that a lot of people have seen, and they describe it the exact same way verbatim. And it's like people who haven't met, and like, but they all have these really deep, either they're all geniuses and they've all used the same account to write, or like, or they use like one single account to like fabricate their own story. Like, I don't really know, but I found that whole thing, the common thread of these experiences make them sort of an undeniable reality, And I have a couple questions from our listeners here I wanted to ask you. Our friend Greg asks, not sure. Oh, there we go. Have you or any of your teachers ever studied, experienced, or worked with people who study or experience DJINN? Do you know what that is?
I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I've never heard of that either. Maybe you can tell us, Greg. And then Steven asks, is there a connection between spirits and the physical, like weather, lights flickering? I've experienced a few weird things.
Yeah. In fact, from what I've learned, spirit can absolutely, because they're energy, they can manipulate electricity. So I'll give you an example. My aunt passed away a couple months ago, and a bunch of people I knew died that week, and a friend of mine died that week. So I said, all right, guys, you've all just now, I know you're on the other side. So I said, Aunt June, listen, talk to Grandma, tell her to show you how to flicker the lights. Because Grandma's joke was, when I die, I'm going to flicker the lights. And so I just said, let them show you how to do this. I walk out of the kitchen and I sit down on the couch, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see flashing. I'm like, no, that's not that. What? And I looked over there. It wasn't just a little. It was all 6 of the lights, or how they're like flashing, like this, like really, really intensely. And I'm like, okay, this has to be, there's no way. This has to be a coincidence. Well, they went on like that for like 5 minutes. And I'm like looking around, I'm like, Aunt June, Lena, all like doing a checklist of all my people who'd passed that week. And then one of the bulbs appeared to go out. The next morning I turned on the lights. Fine. It hasn't happened since. It was literally like a few minutes after I said, start flickering the lights. And it went on for about 5 minutes. That's my own personal experience, but I hear it from so many people. My mom one time said to her parents, like, show me a sign, and all of a sudden her car horn starts blaring in the garage. I mean, just like, and I've heard thousands of stories. I mean, thousands, that was an exaggeration. Well, I've heard so many examples of this from people. And yeah, and that's why also listen out for, they might play a song for you on the radio. They might, something that was your song that you thought of. It could be that some people have gotten text from their loved ones after they've passed away, just when they were thinking about them, and suddenly it pops up and they're like, how is this person? Obviously they're not texting them, but some old message pops up from them, or they're, for some reason, their phone sends a text through the phone.
I have this conversation actually reminded me of an experience I had. And like, I know like the word poltergeist kind of to me is like a scary trigger word for like, oh, something's haunted. But like I had, actually I still have it. I wonder if it's in our bedroom now. I have a little wooden elephant figurine that I got from a friend who was visiting Africa. I forget exactly. I think she went to South Africa. She was visiting, and then she went to the countryside out there, found this little elephant figurine, brought it back, gave it to me. And I took it with me to the next house that I moved to. And there was one day I was just on my computer, sitting in my room. I was sitting on my bed. I decided to look up at my bookshelf because there was like a cool, I don't know, the light was coming in at the right angle, and I thought it was pretty. And it was hitting my bookshelf, and I look up at the top of the bookshelf. There's my elephant figure, and I watch it almost in like super speed. Flies off of the bookshelf into the wall. The leg breaks off, and it lands on the ground as if it moved in a straight line to the wall and broke and then fell. It left a mark on the wall. It was so strange and unexplainable because there was nothing else on my bookshelf that moved. There was no earthquake or anything. But it was so interesting to me because I still can't explain it other than it is something a bit like displaced energy.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's sort of rare for that to happen, but I know people that it's happened to, and it's never happened to me, but I know that it does, and I don't know how that works, but I do think that there's something energetically that's some kind of energetic push, some kind of thing that happens that I don't know what it is, and that's the thing. It's part of that thing we don't understand. And as we were talking before, I'm like, how can you look at any documentary about the universe and be like, oh, yeah, that exists, but like my loved ones in spirit, they're not, that can't be possible. And I'm like, but look at the galaxy. I mean, the universe, it goes on forever and ever and ever and ever. What do you mean? How can that happen? So some of these things are just unexplainable, and people piece them together based on maybe they're a medium and they've connected with spirit. I have, heard mediums say, spirit has told me this, that this is what goes on the other side, and people have gone to the other side and said they've received. The other common thing about going to the other side is everybody says they're able to receive information telepathically. So there's not people chatting. It's like all of a sudden, all the answers of the universe just come into your awareness. And you're like, oh, there's no time. I get it. And sometimes they come back and kind of forget it. And sometimes they still remember it. And it makes it hard for them to live in this world because they're like, this is so weird to try to live in this human body after knowing the expansiveness of my soul. And so, but like I said, I think it's the one thing I'll reiterate is that it's not necessarily paranormal or woo-woo. It's just it's something that we just can't quantify, or it's not something that's easily explained by science. So we think it's not real. Some things just we're not going to know. That we know certain things, but how can we really understand what happens to? I used to think the soul was just the brain, like creating your personality, and like you're basically a little robot, and who has some complex brain that allows them to feel. And I think there's partly that, but then where does the brain design come from? And you could go back and say, okay, yes, evolution is real, but what created evolution? I mean, how they're not even in opposition. Why is it Darwinism versus, it isn't. It's God created evolution. God created where did the galaxy come from? Yes, I know there are scientific explanations, but.
Yeah, but I mean, simultaneously, like you ask enough why questions, and there ceases to be a scientific answer. So it's like, and the same goes for religion. It's like, well, then who created God? And then there's like really nothing to really. But it's like to me, like as I've gotten older, like God has become sort of an abstract concept. It's like God is just, it's not a name. It's just a word. It's like a word that describes something that I will never, ever know the answer to, ever. Like even things that like probably like in my lifetime, I won't know the answer to, like what's beyond Pluto, like, what's in other galaxies, like, I don't think that I'll get to see that, but it's like that's like, it's interesting to me too. I actually was at a friend's house, and one of his friends got angry with me using that word to describe things. And I'm like, well, you could say this particular thing is unexplainable or will never have an answer, or you can just call it God as shorthand. And it's like, but there was so much attachment to that word for people, and I do find it interesting of like people, you know, what people would consider woo-woo or like religious, giving explanations to things that have no explanation makes them scared, which then that becomes anger. And I've wondered why that is. Have you ever experienced that?
Yeah, I think people are afraid of it because they associate it with old school Christianity and Catholicism and the religion that was created by man. I mean, in terms of like the rules of interpreted by man, in the olden times, it was very sort of smothering, restrictive religion where, you know, you can't have sex before marriage. You mustn't do this. God will punish you if you do these things. And it's all very fear-based. Nowadays, that's not what most people I know who are Christian don't. That's a very old-fashioned belief system. But I was uncomfortable about it my whole life. I was like, don't push that on me kind of thing. And I think people associate God with the biblical God. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just that because religion through the Dark Ages became something enforced by the church, by Catholicism, so that they had more power. It's like all these rules aren't really they're just meant to stifle people and tell them you're bad, and there's a lot of shame in that, and it feels very controlling. So to me, God is whatever you want to call it. Some people call it source, some people call it the universe, some people I believe that God is what we are all made of. I mean, God is the bigger thing. God is love. And to me, honestly, as you know, hippie as it sounds, God is love. Every person who goes to the other side that I've interviewed says it's the most love you've ever felt. It's unconditional love. It's not about conditions. It's all just the most peaceful, welcoming, loving form of energy that you're ever going to feel in your life. And that's what God is. And God is what we are all. The other one more common denominator is many people say that they look down and they see that we're all webs of light. So it's almost like we're all connected by strings of light. Quarks of Light is a book written by Rob Gentile, who I interviewed, and it looks like a grid. So I am you, you are me, like you said. If I hurt you, I hurt myself. We're all part of the same light. Some people make bad choices because of mental illness, trauma, indoctrination. We have free will, we have our own brains, but we're all, in my belief, born pure light and pure soul. It's what we do with what we're given. And sometimes it's not our fault. Sometimes we're born with a mental illness and we just don't have the ability to, you know, be all love and light all the time. But that's what happens. Then we split off because we're human. But honestly, I'm going to say it. God is love. That's really my belief.
Well, because like the word, I think love is the only emotion that we all feel it. And I think that I realized it was such a powerful, real thing when it ended with somebody, and it physically, mentally fucked me up. I mean, it was so bad. And so you're like, oh, there is something here. But again, like love is not really an emotion or a feeling one can describe, you know?
Yeah.
So it's God.
And even that human love doesn't even encapsulate the love of God. It's like you said, I mean, and unless you're a sociopath, you've felt it at one time in your life, and we love each other. You know, I love my cat who's in my lap. I love my friends. I love my partner. I love my family. But even then, apparently, when you go to the other side, it's like, it's all encompassing, and you realize we aren't separated at all.
Yeah.
And that's why when people say, well, when you die, you know, does grandma miss me? Well, grandma doesn't miss you when she's on the other side, heaven, whatever you call it, because she's still with you. She's more connected with you than ever before. So there's no missing. You miss them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's I don't know. And again too, it's a very, I think like a lot of the conflict that people feel in their lives, so they just sort of would accept that this might be reality. Like even just sort of a tepid sort of version of doing that, they would just generally be happier. I have this thing I think I've told you before, and I've certainly talked to Sean a lot about it. Like how I think that there are, like it's kind of in the realm of reincarnation, but I've come up with this thing of like new humans or old humans. Like, you know, either you've been around a few times, or like this might be like the end, or like, you know, this is kind of a newer cycle for you. Because like even with reincarnation, there has to be more souls because the population is exponentially growing, you know. But it seems to me that like people who are just unwilling to even consider that this might be an option are kind of in the newer realm of spirit, and have not really like experienced things that, or not allowed themselves to experience things that are profound, or don't really accept them as being profound or bigger than themselves, you know. And so, yeah. Do you see that question?
There's one thing I want to touch on, because you've mentioned actually two things that I want to talk about. You've mentioned, and on your most recent podcast, you and Peter talked about psychedelics a little bit.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you a bit more about that. So you mentioned you had like an experience in college with a poster on your wall when you were on psychedelics, allegedly. I don't know if you want to say that on our podcast.
No, I do. I said it on
Okay.
there, and my mom watches it, so I'm like,
Perfect.
in the past.
So, have you had any other experiences with it? And do you think that opened you up to a more spiritual thing? And do you think it made you closer to your spirituality? So, yeah, I guess that's my question.
That's a really great question.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, in college I did, I think mushrooms and acid I've done several times. It wasn't a lifelong thing, but you know, I went to fish shows, embarrassingly enough. I mean, not whatever. Like,
It's the era, you know. Yeah.
it's just not who I am now. I mean, no, you know, judgment. But you know, I went to I actually saw Jerry Garcia.
Oh wow.
You guys, this is how old I am for the babies. But yeah, so no, I wouldn't say that it made me more spiritual. I think when I was doing those things, I was in a very dark place of self-loathing and low self-esteem. It did make me think about the brain, as I said there. Like, it made me wonder, like, how can my brain create things that I know are not real? There was no fear, but I remember also in that same, it was someone's apartment, and I remember like watching they had an iguana in a cage, and all of a sudden the cage started breathing, but like not only did it expand and contract, I heard it breathing. Like, I heard,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I know that I'm hallucinating this. I know that, but how is my brain? I'm looking at it and it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So it does make you wonder, and it confuses me too, because I also am really interested in ayahuasca trips, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm always like, I wonder if you are actually being taken into cat hair everywhere. I wonder if you are being taken into another dimension. Some people say yes, you're communing with spirit, but then I'm also like, but then at the same time, if your brain is being altered by a chemical, then does that also show that it's actually your brain creating these realities? It's so mind-boggling, and it kind of makes me unsettled, because it makes me think, oh no, what if there is something in the brain that makes everyone have a near-death experience that's just brain chemicals going crazy? I don't believe it, just because of the consistency and the patterns, but
Well, I mean, like, I think like with something like DMT, for example, which is like what your brain does release a large amount of when you are dying. Everyone sees the same thing, which is like, you know, people have a very hard time. I think because like when people have like death or near death, or rather death experiences, or I guess you'd play near death, because if you, you know, or died or came back or whatever, it's like, it's more clear because the event that's associated with what's happening is so traumatic. You know what I mean? So I think that like, it's kind of like you know, thinking like when you have a dream that you find to be profound and you think about it afterwards for like a few minutes, you'll remember it. But if you just let it go, you'll totally forget even what you saw. And so people who know, I've done every psychedelic in excess, but I've not done DMT. Not for lack of trying. It's just access. I don't really know where to find it. But like people always describe the same type of figures. It's like this kind of like, there's like a commonality of everybody that does it. And it makes me want, because again, I mean, like even saying that, like, you know, when you die, it would release that chemical, makes it then invalid that chemical could therefore be the other side or spirits or whatever. It's like more like perhaps you, again, like perhaps you are, like perhaps you know, this chemical that like DMT exists in every living thing. Like, like you could theoretically make any living thing into this chemical, you know, like plants are full of it. But like in order to synthesize it, it's a whole other process. But also you have there's something in your, I think it's in your stomach that breaks it down, that like keeps you from eating like a salad and tripping balls. You know what I mean? It's like,
that's why that's right. That it's that chemical.
Yeah.
That's actually why they call it the God molecule, because, which is so interesting too.
Yeah,
Like
I
there's a
think
little
that
bit of God in us, and maybe that's what that molecule is.
you have to wonder, right? And so, like, you know, point being that, like, I think psychedelics, you know, I think that DMT, I think, is sort of like the end all be all, but certainly, like, on psychedelics, like, it's useful in terms of, like, I think just dissociatives in general are useful, like, just to get out of your own way sometimes and see yourself, like, kind of more objectively. And I think that that's because, like, I think, like, you know, the enemy of, like, being a spiritual person is, like, your own ego, you know, and or, like, and that doesn't have to even mean ego in the sense that we think of it, but just your sense of self, you know, which is like, we're all of our own self perceptions are so skewed. It's like, you know, we are always thinking about what the other person thinks about us, and we're never right. They're not really thinking about you; they're thinking about themselves and what they look like to you. It's like, it's this kind of incredible vicious cycle. But I think that if you can finally stop that cycle, it can really make you realize that, you know, kind of with spirituality, like, you know, your conception of what reality is, it's like, you know, you can be so fried, and, you know, who knows if that fish tank was breathing, you know, or the iguana tank. It's like, I mean, who really knows? I mean, and
Maybe
that's,
it was, maybe molecule, because actually part of all of this and what people learn on the other side is that the things that we think are solid are not, well, and science, we know that this microphone over here, which you can't see, it's made up of atoms and molecules, like, but it's hard, you know, when we feel it, when we touch it, it's hard, but really there's spaces between those molecules that, so, like, the idea is that it's actually just an illusion, that everything's solid. I mean, scientifically and spiritually, the idea that all of this is matter is actually just sort of an illusion, which is really weird. But and that people say when they leave their bodies, they realize that they are so expansive. Their soul is just, you can even do DMT meditations, which I do all the time, which, not that you're on DMT, but it stimulates the pineal gland, which also releases some DMT. And I do it, and I actually did it last night, and I start to see visions. Like, I don't know, the minute I start playing binaural beats, which I also recommend for anyone, which kind of opened me up to all of this, is one of the first times I tried it, I was listening to binaural beats sober, and I'm just lying down, and all of a sudden I jumped up, and I'm like, and Jeff, my boyfriend, goes, what happened? I'm like, I literally just went somewhere else. I said, I was standing in a snowy, like, it looked like a Robert Frost poem. I was in a snowy wood with these, like, old timey lamps. And I'm looking through this house with these windows, and there are candles in the windows. And I watched the snowfall. And I said, it felt like, I mean, obviously I knew I wasn't really there, but it was vivid. Like, so it was like I was looking at my room. And I've also been able to remote view, which is one other thing I want to make sure I mention, because I think it's really cool, and I think everyone can do it, actually. I learned that I could, after that happened, I'm like, I could close my eyes and still see the room. Obviously, that's partly memory, right? Like, but literally, like, there are times where I closed my eyes and I started to be like, wait, I can literally see the detail and everything with my eyes closed. So I took it further, because I'm like, well, that could be my memory, right? That could be because I know this room so well. Well, I was doing a practice reading recently, and I said to the woman, you know what, just because I'm kind of like losing steam here, I'm going to ask your mother in spirit to show me your house. I want to look around. So I did like a thing where I kind of like visualize it. And I said, okay, in your house, is there a hallway that, and I'm doing it now just to relive it. I'm like, there's this hallway, and at one end is your bedroom, and on the other end, there's this other room. And I said, and I feel, and I can see it. It has so much clutter. I said, no judgment, but it's the clutter room. You don't know what to do with things. That's where it is. There's like a suitcase in there. There are clothes piled up. And I said, and on the right-hand side, there's a dresser and a Raggedy Ann doll there. And she goes, do you want to see the room? We're on Zoom. She takes her laptop. We walk in the room. There's Raggedy Ann sitting on her freaking dresser. She's a 60-year-old woman. She doesn't have kids. Not only that, there is a suitcase in there. There are clothes everywhere. And I even said the bed doesn't have a proper comforter on it. It has, like, that was my first going, okay, that was my own, like, spirit mic drop, where I'm like, okay, whatever this is, I don't know how we do this, but I don't know if it's spiritual, if it's just part of our ability as a human being that we're unaware of. But if you meditate enough, you can go into people's house. I've done it, and I've been doing it more in my readings, where I say, I want to see I'll say, you have a child. imagine, like, let me go into her bedroom and I'll say, I see athletic medals and she's got braces and this happened. And the woman was like, yeah, she is playing soccer. She did just get braces. I'm like, she's got a blonde ponytail. I see her in soccer clothes. How do I do that? I describe the personalities of each of her children. I don't know how, but I'm in her house somehow. I'm looking around. I said, don't worry, I'm not looking in your underwear drawers, but somehow I'm able to see into your house.
Are you
Not
able
always.
are you able to see yourself in third person?
No, that would be cool. However, during one of those binaural beats meditations, I also started to feel the out of body thing happening. You know how people on YouTube will be like, here's how you astral travel. Well, I've never quite gotten there, but there was a time when I started to feel the vibration and then I started to feel a lift and I'm like, and then I got freaked out and stopped. But there's
Yeah.
something happening with the detachment of the soul versus the body. I don't know how it works.
It's weird because you were talking about that, and I remembered a very vivid memory of like that happening to me, and because I remember like where I was and what was going on, not traveling around, but actually like I was still seeing out my eyes, but I literally could like see. It was like I became suddenly very conscious of like how I was moving and what I was doing. But we went to a Starbucks. I was super like over caffeinated, which I think might have activated something. And I was in a sharper image when those existed, which I'm like dating myself now. And then it was weird. It was like I couldn't get it to stop either. It was like I could see like the top of my head and my movements, and I felt like I wasn't in control of my body, and it was like very unsettling because I didn't really know what was going on, and I thought like, am I having like a seizure or like what's happening or something medical? I thought it was, and then it eventually just kind of snapped back in. But it was so vivid. I mean, I was probably like 9 or 10, I mean, or like maybe 12. I don't know, but it was so weird. And I've experienced that same feeling with ketamine. That one like really just you can drift out and like see yourself laying there. But your eyes are closed, but. It's like, but I mean, it's a shame to have to use something that powerful to get to that point again. But it's a very, like it can be like a useful experience, especially if you're, attached, like, because being like depression or whatever, not necessarily clinical, but just sometimes if it gets worse, it's connected to your ego a bit, and like, and sometimes just having to break that loop of shitty thoughts, and so when you can look at that loop from a little bit of a distance, it can sort of be like, oh well. Can shatter it and get out of that mess. I wanted to ask you, do you think that dreams have utility?
Yes. In fact, here's another really cool thing. So dreams are our brains processing everything that's going on. But isn't it weird how our dreams are like, it's like someone wrote a script based on what we're feeling, but changed all the details in the perfect sequence so that we're able to see it. Like that in itself is, even if that's just the brain, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But here's what's really cool too is visitations. So a lot of people will say, well, I dreamed about my, loved one in spirit. If it's just a dream where you and your loved one are like at a carnival and you're eating corn dogs and then you run into Barney and the big purple dinosaur Barney, and like all of a sudden like someone like Jim Morrison's there, that's not a visitation probably. I mean, unless it's really significant to you. But the thing about visitations is that spirits can come to you in dreams and you'll know. And it's only happened to me one time. But it feels different. And for my experience, and often they'll come to you on an important date or something, or if you're in grief or something really significant is going on. Mine happened maybe a couple years ago where it didn't feel like a dream. It was like I'm asleep. And then all of a sudden I just walk up to this little table and my grandfather's sitting there. And he's young, and they usually appear younger because they're not going to show you, like they're not going to come to you as an old crone. Like they want you to see them in their best, like when they're glowing and happy at their best time in their life. And I see him and he's like glowing. He looks like he's 45. He's wearing this fuzzy cashmere, like, which he wouldn't have worn. It was like a baby blue sweater. And my grandma was sitting there. She's in spirit too, but she was sitting just sort of next to him, kind of sitting back. And I just walked up to him and I said, Grandpa, you look so beautiful. I'm like, I could see every pore in his face. I could see, and I said, you're so real. And he just didn't say anything. He just smiled and he just hugged me. And I just got the biggest chills again. he hugged me, and all we did was hug. And I said, "You feel so real. It's so real." And I was looking at his eyes, and I could see every wrinkle, like every little eye crease and every little pore. And that was it. And then I woke up. And so then I'm going through my day, and I just look at the calendar, and I'm like, okay, it's March 21st. It's my grandfather's birthday today. It didn't even occur to me. And I haven't, he's been gone for so many years. Like, it feels like yesterday, but it's probably been like 15 years. And so I wasn't tuned into his birthday. I hadn't thought about it. It was, then I heard a medium say, "Oh, they'll usually come to you on their birthday or something." And I'm like, well, that makes perfect sense, because that was not a dream. It was like, I saw him as clear as day, and I felt him, and the hug felt so real. So look out for those too. So it helps process, yes, but it also can be a way for a spirit to communicate with you, and they might also show you something. The night before, let's see, September 10th, the year of 9/11. I woke up from a really bad dream. I called my mom. I said I had this horrible dream that I was in New York City, and there were all these tall buildings, and there were planes and bombs dropping, and people were running. And I said, and I was just running through the tall buildings, and I couldn't get away. And I said, and it was like Iraq was bombing us. And she said, well, that's not going to happen. I mean, that's so unlikely. And she said, but what it was, then this might have been the September 10th when I told her this. And she's like, there's no way that they could attack us like that. And I said, okay, but it was so real that I actually talked to her about it. Then, of course, September 11th, we're woken up at 6:30 or whatever by a friend saying, turn on the news. And I looked at the screen, and I called my mom. I said, Mom, it happened. And she said, well, it wasn't Iraq. I said, I know, but it did have to do with the Iraq war. So I don't know. A lot of people had that experience in that dream. Now, I don't know if it was my spirit people or just a universal consciousness. It was such a powerful consciousness that I think all of us felt it in some way, like something was off. And I think sometimes your loved ones will warn you or tell you something. And in those cases, not because there's anything you can do about it. That was just, I think, the universal energy of something. This was, maybe it had happened before in another dimension, whatever it was. I think we all knew it. But I think they also come to you sometimes if there's something you need to know. Like, they might come to you in a dream and say, get to the doctor, check your liver or something. Yeah. Just sometimes they will turn up like that.
I've often wondered, or like also too, like what, like things that like were traumatic or experiences, like why sometimes dreams will like force you to like live them over and over and over again. Yeah. And I don't really have an answer to that. I'm curious if like, because I mean, have you ever had that experience where it's like things you feel like you've dealt with, and you keep dreaming about it.
Well, my sister and I found out that we have the exact same dream. That now, again, everyone has. I just talked to my friend the other day, and we're like, the dream where you're still in high school, but you don't know what your class schedule is, and you're trying to find the administrative office because you don't know. She's like, I have that I'm like, I literally have it every night, and I find out that I didn't graduate, and that I think is just sort of like a processing of, just sort of like forgetting where you are in life while you're asleep, and there's all this past stuff happening. But my sister and I were talking about how we both have the exact same dream where it's never just, oh, I'm in Hawaii on a beautiful vacation. It's always we have to pack, and there's never enough. Like, the more we try to pack to catch the plane, the more stuff shows up, and there's more to pack, and then there's suitcases. And she's like, I have that packing dream like every single night. Both of us have moved a lot. I don't know what it is, but we both have this theme of, we're missing a plane, we're on a flight, or I'm in some beautiful place, Costa Rica, and we're all there, but like my parents are there, and they're like, I say, come on, let's go exploring, and all they want to do is sit in the hotel room. And the whole trip is over, and then they're like, time to get on the plane. And I say, but we didn't do anything. And it's like the same dream every single night. What that is about is probably about how I want to go travel again. I want to go to Costa Rica, but I feel like money is a hindrance. COVID's a hindrance. I can't really get anyone on board to do this with me. So that might just be my brain over and over processing, that. But it could also be a message of something you're ignoring. If it is something that's deeper rooted that you haven't addressed in therapy or through self-exploration, it could also be, hey, you need to pay attention to this. In my case, these dreams just feel like me processing, wanting to be free and wanting to like just go without having all these burdens of, oh, but I have to work, or my partner has to work, or I have to take luggage. You can't just go. It's always an ordeal. However, the one thing I'll say is everyone who has died and come back is like, when you're over there, if you want to go to Costa Rica, you just go.
Yeah.
You just think it and you're there. No more luggage. No more baggage.
Yeah.
You don't have to get on a flight. It's all smooth sailing. So I tell myself that one day, if I want to go, I'll just go. I'll just float on over there.
That's a nice way to look at it. What, you got another question, Mister?
Oh, there was another thing that, because we've talked a lot about other people having like shared near-death experiences.
Yes.
On your latest one, you talked about how you had sort of like a medication issue that you took two together, and you experienced something like that. And I think the motion that struck me is you did this with your hands. You said, "This is how I felt," and you were slowly drifting away from yourself. I just want to ask you more about that experience and what that did for your perspective.
Thanks. Yeah, I didn't actually, go to another. I threw up before I got anywhere, but I had mixed ibuprofen and naproxen. I had endometriosis pain. I took these 2 pills. All of a sudden, I started to feel, I was getting ready for work and I couldn't feel my hands anymore. And then suddenly I couldn't feel my feet. And then the tingling and the numbness went all the way up my extremities and just started to be like, it was like, you know what it was like? Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future, when he looks at the picture of himself and he's just slowly fading. It was like my hands were gone, my arms were gone, my legs were gone. And then all of a sudden, this blackness enveloped me. And there was like a pinprick of light at the middle of it. It was like not the tunnel, but I felt myself being swallowed up in it. And instead of panicking, I thought, oh, okay, this is how I die. I'm about to die right now. And I was so peaceful. I was so calm. I felt like I was just falling backwards, like gently falling into a warm blanket. It felt so peaceful. Granted, it would have been a peaceful way to die since there was no trauma involved and it happened so fast. But then I barfed and it was all over. But this kind of, I feel like I was going. I was falling into it almost like slow motion in the movies where they show someone falling back onto some silk mattress, silk covered mattress. It felt so warm. I just felt so at peace and so warm. And that was it. And then I didn't go further than that. I didn't cross the threshold.
Very interesting. I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that because that struck me from that episode.
Yeah, from what I understand, dying is not painful. What's painful is whatever events leading up to it, even life. But, obviously it depends on how you die, whether you feel pain. But a lot of times for that, I think something I think is really comforting is, I always have a fear of like, oh my God, dying in a plane crash would be so scary and awful, or drowning, or, obviously being murdered or something horrible. But everyone who dies, a lot of times when they have a trauma, like they were in a plane crash or something, they were drowning. Actually, a lot of people have drowned. They all said that their spirit actually left before getting a woman I have become friends with that was hit by a truck. It's like, it's their spirit leaves before they even know what happened. It's like somehow you're spared that moment of impact. It's like 1 minute you're there and the next minute you're like, did I just die? What happened? Which is kind of a nice thought. And also people who drown have said it is the most peaceful way to die. You would not think so. But once they just surrender to it, and I'm not advocating this, I'm not advocating that anyone do this, but they said it wasn't like you would think. You would think, oh my God, you'd be struggling and panicking. And once they just let the water into their lungs, they felt their soul lifted and they just were gone. And I like that idea because it takes some of the fear out of all the horrible things that can happen in this life. It doesn't mean I still would, there's so many horrible ways that you could die, but I think that somehow you're spared up until the moment. I mean, obviously there are a lot of circumstances that are awful, but and you don't want them to go through them. But I do. It is comforting to know that when you die, I've heard dying is not painful at all. Dying is the most beautiful feeling you'll ever have in your life. So look, even if we're wrong, even if I'm wrong, and let's say there's nothing, we're not going to know. So why not believe it now? Let yourself
Exactly it.
enjoy. Just know it's all going to be good when I die, and then when you die, if the last thing you know is that you felt amazing and peaceful, who cares? Like, I'd rather just keep believing it. I don't want to hear why you think near-death experiences are all a chemical thing in the head. It doesn't serve me. I believe it. I believe it logically, but I also would just prefer to believe it because life is hard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, you're talking about drowning, and I have a lot of friends that were or are lifeguards, and they say that, like, when you see somebody who's drowning, lifeguards, like, they're not flailing like in movies. It's like flailing. It's just like you just watch their head sort of start to go underneath, and like, so the person's like really going, because it's like, it's not what it's portrayed in movies at all. It's like you look for the person that isn't flailing, like they're the one that's in big trouble. So that probably is like part of the experience, is like you do. I think that, like, you start to, like, I think you sort of know when to give up sometimes. It's like, where this is kind of it. And I think that, like, probably we would never really know what it's like to die in a plane crash, but it's like, I would imagine it would be similar. I have a feeling I'd laugh. I just think it was funny. Like, yeah, well, all right, this makes sense.
I think the worst part would be the plummeting, and then my mom always said to me, I was like, I don't want to die in a plane crash. You said, but you wouldn't even know. Like, you when you hit the ground, you wouldn't know. And it's hard for us to imagine. What do you mean I wouldn't know? I'm being blown to smithereens. Like, how could I not feel it? But you don't. I mean, I don't know. But even if you do, it's so fast.
I mean, the likelihood of you not being knocked unconscious at the very least, like, while you die, is so low.
Well, and that's the thing, you forget. So the worst part is the fear. Fear is real. That's the fear and anxiety, and that's true of all things in life. Most things. Most things are worse worrying about them than they actually are when they happen. I mean, anxiety and fear can be worse than an incident itself. Obviously, that excludes severe trauma and abuse and violence. I mean, I'm not saying that, but in general, most things we're really, really nervous about turn out to not be as bad as we thought it was. So if we're living our whole life in fear of death, we're wasting a lot of energy, because I'm 99.9% positive that death is not something to be feared. It's something that we fear because I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose my mom. I don't want to lose somebody I love and care about, because that's the pain. I mean, that's what I fear, is going through grief. The grief is the worst part. But if you're the person leaving, you're all good. And in fact, a lot of people who go to the other side say, on the other side, there is no good or bad. There's no judgment of good or bad. It just is. And so what we think here is bad, there's no value of bad there. It's all just a life lesson. And what Peter Panagore said, it's all God's wink, or the wink of God. Our lives here, when you're on the other side, you see that it's that fast. So people are like, why would I come here to struggle? And why would my soul choose to go through this horrible circumstance only to suffer? Well, the answer on the other side is because when your soul chooses it, because they're like, I want to go into this life and I need to learn this lesson, so I'm going to choose this hardship, which is another belief I have. You can't imagine, but why would I choose that? Why would I choose to have a loved one murdered, or have, lose a child or something? Well, it's because on the other side, they're like, oh, it's just going to take a second. Don't worry about it. Like, to us, it's 100 years of pain. But on the other side, it's like, no, it's just one quick lesson. Just do that and then come back. And once you're on the other side, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, it wasn't, not to dismiss, or like minimize anyone's pain or horrible things that happen, because it's awful. But that's sort of the attitude on the other side, is it isn't, our lives are so fast.
Yeah, that's like the way that I've always thought about it. And it's also like, even for like, from a very young age, I've never been afraid of dying. Like, and I don't know if it's like because of, I've tried to find a lot of logical explanations for it. Like, for a long time, it was like, okay, well, your brain's not fully formed till you're 25, and like maybe I'll grasp the permanence of that or whatever. And then now I'm 30 and I still feel the exact same way. Like, the fear of death is just not there. The feeling of like impermanence doesn't scare me. In fact, I find it kind of a relief. Like, when people say like, oh, wouldn't you want to live forever? Fuck out of here. No way.
No way.
Like, I am not, when the exit will be much appreciated. You know what I mean? Like, not like I'm miserable or anything, but it's just sort of like if because you mentioned it earlier, it's like if death just is nothing, like a black void. Well, it's like I didn't remember being born, so if it was like that, which was probably pretty great, I'll take that on the other end too. If it's something beyond that, that would be even more awesome. It's like totally fine with me. But it's like, again, like you mentioned, like suffering and like kind of like we're sometimes it does feel like we are here to suffer. But my question for you is two things. Like why do we, like, number one is, why are people so afraid of death and dying? It's always like, because I would ask people these questions, but when you ask people that question, it also scares the shit out of them. And then the other thing is, why do we fetishize death with funerals in the West? Like, I find it to be this weird ceremony that is so for the living and so pointless. Yeah. So those two questions.
Oh yeah, those. Okay, well, okay. So one is that when people fetishize, people do these things for themselves. Okay, so like when people say, "Oh, I go to my daughter's grave every day," you do that for you. You don't have to do that. Your daughter is not there at the gravesite. Do you think I'm going to leave my body and go to the other side and like hang out at my gravesite? No, I'm going to be with my loved ones in spirit. I'm going to be lingering around. I'm going to be with them, and I'm also going to be in the other dimension, floating around, feeling great, and doing what I love to do, whatever that may be. So, one, the fear of death is the unknown. Even though I believe 100% that I know, I don't. That's not the truth. That's my truth. That's my belief. It's not the absolute truth because I don't know that. So people are afraid of death because we're attached to these lives and these bodies that we're in. We're attached to the people we love. We form families. We have this survival instinct to survive. That, I think, is just that's just a biological thing to keep our species going. So it's ingrained in us to be afraid of death. That's why, obviously, if a tiger comes after, an alpaca or something, they're gonna run and try to save their lives. But the thing too is that we also experience grief when someone dies. So to us, it's this horrible, because obviously it's like the biggest pain we could ever feel is to lose someone that we're connected with. So, but I think more than that, people are afraid of what they don't know. It's like, what's gonna happen to me? Is nothing gonna happen? How do I go from this sentient being with all these thoughts and passions and feelings to just dead? And what does that all mean? And like, so the light just goes out and that's it? Then what's it all for? I mean, it's very easy to get depressed when you think of it that way. It's depressing and scary. And I have a very close friend who's an atheist, and he gets very depressed he's terrified to die. And I think, and it makes me sad because it's like it just has such a hold on you. So there's the fear of death, and then you said there was a second question,
just like fetishizing, like just funerals, like just like this idea of a funeral, and like just this, like it seems to make the grieving process worse. I mean, it's like almost like and then also we find dead bodies to be like disgusting, even though it's somebody we loved. It's really weird.
It is weird because they're lifeless, and I think the ritual it's first of all, we're just human beings are ritualistic. We just traditionally do things, or there's something about the tradition, and I think that, like, for instance, funerals themselves the value in them is coming together with everyone who loved that person and honoring them, and that's normal. That makes perfect sense. I personally have been like, I want to turn me to ash, do whatever you want. It doesn't matter. I mean, I don't want to take up space in the ground and take up a lot space. I think, again, it comes back to that religion of wanting everything to fit in a box of like, well, these are the traditions and these are the rules. And when we pass, we need to burn the body on a funeral pyre, or else they're not going to go to the other side. I think someone just sort of creates these things to make themselves more comfortable with what they don't know. It's easier to say, we're going to make these set of rules that's like, well, if we bury them in this way or we anoint them in this way, their soul will go on. I think it's just a way of having control over something we don't have control over, and feeling comforted in the ritual of it, and also just closure. And I think it's great to have a memorial and say goodbye, join with your loved ones, celebrate that person's life, cry, grieve, hug, all that stuff. But I do think that there is a big fear around death, and I think it's all our need to control it in whatever way that we can by giving it a name and giving it ritual.
Yeah.
It just makes us feel more in control of the whole process.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I got one last question for you, unless you got any more. All right. Do you think this country? Well, we'll take about this country just because it's right in front of our face. Do you think this country is in a spiritual crisis?
No, I actually feel that this
cool.
country is in a. I actually feel that we are in a spiritual ascension period. I believe that everything that's gone down in the last few years is. I just felt a big chill again. It's all breaking us down to build something better, meaning that things have to be shaken up. And actually, more and more people are becoming spiritual, which is surprising to me. I didn't realize how many people actually do believe in this stuff. I always thought most people don't, but it's actually not true statistically, at least by studies. But I think that what's happening is, even though it looks ugly on the surface with all this division and this anger and this tearing down of systems in place, and the pandemic, and all of these things that seem really scary, it's actually happening for a reason, which is to help us confront. We all have had to. It's very confronting, for one thing. We've all had to confront the dark and the light. We've in ourselves, in other people. We've had to, and there's been so much division, but I think that what's happening is it's happening because we needed to shake things up. I mean, look, there are things that do need to be addressed, that have been ignored for too long. And then there are also just systems in place that aren't working. But then there's also just confronting our own, who am I and what do I believe? And having to sort of learn to stand firm in our beliefs when the rest of the world is when you're not, it's not a popular opinion. There's so many things. I think it's all kind of shaking us up to help us all evolve spiritually, even though we don't realize it. And I've heard that too from a lot of spiritual people as well, that this is actually, it actually literally is the age of Aquarius. And it's actually it's actually a renaissance, like a spiritual renaissance. Yes, we went from like screaming and anger and fear and division, but I believe that it's all ultimately in our greater good. And again, not to minimize anyone's losses during this time or say like, oh, it's all for a reason, just no problem. But I think that from a spiritual perspective, it is helping us all grow, evolve, find compassion, find forgiveness, find self-healing, and break down systems that weren't working and build them back up. And I don't mean like even just political systems or anything like that. I think just what's not working here. Something, obviously people are angry and there's a reason. So I think it is worth addressing that there are people that are upset for a reason, and like we do need to look at the way that we interact with one another, treat one another. But at the end of the day, I hope that the ultimate thing that we all take from it is we've all had to learn compassion, we've all had to learn patience, we've had to learn to go, okay, let's remember that we are all, this is what I've done. I'm not a political party, I am a soul, and you are a soul. Namaste. Namaste means like the light in me sees the light in you. And that's been very difficult during this time, but I think it's actually challenged us to all step up and try to put our differences aside and work together as a human race. And not everyone's going to be on board, but we can do what we have to do. We can all be the change that we want to see. And I mean, from a spiritual perspective, show kindness, show tolerance, show compassion. We can criticize, we can have debates, healthy debates. We can talk about our differences. We can bandy about ideas. But at the end of the day, we really have to remember that like all this screaming and yelling is not what we're about. That's not what we're here. This is all a stage play. And I will leave you with Laura Lynn Jackson, who is a wonderful medium. She was actually on that Surviving Death documentary, if you saw it. And she said, what happens is this is all a stage play. And when we die, we all finish the play and we all go backstage and we meet up for the after party. It's like we're all going to end up there at the end of the day. This is all just a chess game. It's all just maneuvers and things happening, but it's actually all an illusion, and it's all just Earth School, and that's what it is.
I love that. It's a very optimistic view of everything, and I think I'm gonna at least feel that for the next few days before I descend radically back into cynicism.
Yeah. It's, I know, it's easy to do, but
Yeah. Well, I think we all just got to try harder on that. But it sounds like I very much like your perspective, and I so appreciate you coming on.
Shannon, we adore you.
Yes.
And
I adore you too. I'm so honored. I'm so excited to actually be on the Fruit Basket.
The Fruit Basket. So Shannon's podcast is called Magic is Real. It's on the podcast app, and then I have her YouTube link below this video that you can click in the description. And then Shannon, stick around after when I put the intro up, because we'll talk for a second afterwards. But anyway, we're going to say goodbye to the audience. We love you all, and we'll see you next Wednesday.
Namaste.
Namaste.
The Fruit Basket.